30th of May, 1980. Allison Rook was a 60-year-old widow who lived in a red brick flat on Hannah Street, Frankston North. On Friday the 30th of May, 1980, Allison was experiencing car trouble, so she ditched the car and decided to catch a bus along the Frankston-Dandenong Road instead. Allison had to go grocery shopping and visit the real estate agent to pay a bill. She was seen leaving her flat at 11 a.m. and walking towards the bus stop on Frankston-Dandenong Road by her neighbors. Allison didn't finish her grocery shopping and didn't make it to the real estate agent. The bus driver couldn't remember picking Allison up that day. 5 weeks later, on July 5, 1980, Allison's body was found by a man walking his dogs. His dog found Allison's body partially hidden by scrubland on McClellan Drive. Allison was found naked, her body decomposed. Bertha Miller was 75 years old and living with her brother-in-law, William Ross, on Cardinia Street, Glen Iris. At 10:15 a.m. on Sunday, the 10th of August, 1980, Bertha called out to her brother-in-law, William, who was in the shower. She told him she was off to church, she would be home late, and not to wait for her to have lunch. In order to get to the church, Bertha caught the tram from High Street, Glen Iris. Her good friend Jessie Moore lived nearby in Burke Road. For the previous 10 years, Bertha and Jessie caught the same tram to church every Sunday. The 10:47 a.m. along High Street. Bertha boarded at the terminus, and Jessie joined her shortly after at the Burke Road stop. When Jessie got on the tram that day, Bertha was nowhere to be found. A shopkeeper last saw Bertha as she walked the 400 meters to the tram stop. Her body was found together with the body of Anne-Marie Sargent on Saturday, 6th of December, 1980, by a local garage owner and his friend, 2 kilometers north of the Princess Highway at Tynong North along Brew Road. Catherine's body was discovered 15 meters away. Catherine Headland was 14 years old. When she was just 1, she emigrated to Australia from England with her family in 1966. She lived with her mother and older brother in Allen Street, Berwick. Catherine worked part-time on weekends at the Coles supermarket in the local Fountain Gate shopping center. The 28th of August, 1980, was Catherine's first midweek shift during the school holidays. She didn't start work until noon, but she left home at 9:30 to see her boyfriend. John lived on High Street, Berwick, about a 1-mile walk. John had a number of other friends visiting, and they watched TV and listened to records. At 11:10 a.m., Catherine left John's house and walked to the bus stop at the corner of Manuka Road and High Street, where she planned to catch the 11:20 a.m. bus to work. Catherine never made it. She was never seen again. Her body was found on Sunday, 7th of December, 1980, in the same area as bodies of Bertha Miller and Anne-Marie Sargent, 2 kilometers north of the Princess Highway at Tynong North along Brew Road. Anne-Marie Sargent was 18 years old. She lived with family friends on Railway Road in the outer southeastern suburb of Melbourne called Cranbourne. When she left, she said she was headed to the nearby suburb of Dandenong to the Commonwealth Employment Service Office, or CES, to collect an unemployment check. Anne-Marie made it to the CES. The form was lodged there by her, but after she left the office, she was never seen again. A local garage owner and his friend discovered her body alongside that of Bertha Miller on December 6, 1980, 2 kilometers off the Princess Highway and Tynong North along Brew Road. Same place where Catherine's body was found 15 meters away. Narimal Stevenson was 34 years old. She was born in Thailand. In 1978, she married Victorian dairy farmer Wayne Stevenson and moved to Australia in August 1979. Wayne and Naramal lived on a farm in Deans Marsh, 134 kilometers southwest of Melbourne. November 28, 1980, was the day they traveled to Melbourne with another couple to see a concert. The following day, on the 29th of November, they all visited another friend in Park Street, Brunswick, around 18 kilometers away in the inner north of Melbourne. When they arrived, Naramal was agitated and refused to get out of the car and enter the flat. Wayne Stevenson and the other couple drank wine and coffee in the flat. Wayne checked on Naramal at least 3 times. She was walking down the street the second time. She was talking to a man in a car with a European accent the third time. After this third check, Wayne sat with his wife in their car until it was almost dawn. Then he walked upstairs and fell asleep. Naramal remained in the car, still refusing to enter the flat. Shortly after 6 a.m., Wayne Stevenson walked back downstairs to see his wife, but she wasn't there. The car was still there, but Naramal was missing. Her body was found on Thursday, the 3rd of February, 1983, by a teacher and former AFL footballer Barry Davis near the bush track along the Princess Highway in Tynong North. She was last to found 2 years after she went missing. Joy Summers, a 55-year-old widow, lived only 1 kilometer away from Alison Rook's flat, even though they didn't know each other. Joy lived on Norfolk Crescent, Frankston North. Every Friday she went shopping with her friend William Cotter. William couldn't go on Friday the 9th of October, 1981, because he had a few medical appointments booked, so he couldn't go. Joy didn't like shopping alone, but she decided to catch a bus from Frankston Dandenong Road into Frankston to buy some meat on her own anyway. She was seen by neighbors outside her home at 1 p.m. heading to the bus stop, which was only 100 meters away at the intersection of Chilly Street and Frankston Dandenong Road. Joy was last seen at the bus stop at 1:20 p.m. The bus driver couldn't recall picking her up, and she never placed her order at the butcher's. 6 weeks later, on Sunday the 22nd of November 1981, at about 11 a.m., a man collecting firewood found Joy's naked body hidden in thick scrub in bushland near the intersection of Sky Road and McClellan Drive, Frankston North, only about 3 kilometers away from where Alison Rook's body was located. Like Alison's body, Joy was covered, but not buried. The bodies of the women were found in such a state of decomposition that detectives were unable to determine a cause of death. It would take another 9 years after the first women were found before DNA could be used in an Australian court to convict someone of a crime. Because the bodies were found in different places, the investigations were initially treated separately, although they were later linked based on case and MO similarities. The recent Truro murders in South Australia shared many similarities. All of the victims, according to the police at the time, were walking, with the majority of them intending to take public transportation when they vanished. Several may have tried to hitchhike. Authorities assumed that the victims probably knew or trusted their abductor, given the lack of eyewitnesses to anything suspicious. The causes of death were elusive, and many bodies were stripped of their belongings. Around 2,000 interviews were held regarding the case, and later investigators speculated the possibility of 2 or 3 separate offenders. Several suspects were examined in the review, but Harold John Janman was deemed the best nominee, a former projectionist known for giving women rides in his car and having connections to both Tynong North and Frankston. Interesting connections aren't necessarily evidence, and Janman has always maintained his innocence. He presented himself as a deeply religious family man and a prude who would turn girly photos to the wall in the small city projection room where he worked. yet he had been charged with soliciting for the purposes of prostitution the year before the murders began. It was also around that time, he would tell the police, that my wife was going to leave me. He freely admitted that he often offered women lifts on the Frankston-Dandenong Road, where Rook and Summers disappeared in 1980 and 1981. He agreed to drive with police down the busy road and identify where he invited women into his van. There were 9 stops, including the 2 where Rook and Summers would have been waiting for the bus, but he wasn't always so forthcoming on every question. Police took him to where the bodies were found. He became nervous and started sweating a lot. He walked around the sites as asked, but at no time did he walk in the immediate vicinity of where the bodies had been lying. According to a police analysis, extensive areas around the sites had been cleared of bush and scrub by the police crime scene searchers. The investigators stated that without some prior knowledge, it would not have been possible to tell exactly where the 2 bodies had been lying. 3 days after the interview, and on the anniversary of the discovery of the first body at Tynong, Johnman turned up unannounced at the Frankston police station to ask Senior Constable Michael White, "You know I was brought in about 2 murders in Frankston. Well, why haven't I been asked about 5 murders instead of 2? White: "Which other ones are you talking about?" Johnman: "The ones in Tynong. I'm just saying, why haven't they asked about that?" The trouble was, no one, at least publicly, had at that time linked the 2 murder scenes. No one, that is, except Johnman. According to FBI crime profiler Robert Ressler, serial killers often reach out to investigators. Some offenders attempt to inject themselves into the investigation of the murder or otherwise keep in touch with the crime in order to continue the fantasy that started it. It is a matter of fact that after Johnman was interviewed on December 3, 1981, the murders stopped, a fact that may, of course, be entirely coincidental. 15 years after the last body was found, Johnman was arrested in St. Kilda when he approached an undercover policewoman and asked for sex. He immediately told police he was the prime suspect in the Tynong North killings. Homicide investigators try to find links between where bodies are discovered and the offender, as in most cases, killers return to areas they know. Johnman had lived in Garfield, the area adjoining the killer's dumping ground. He had worked at a nearby hotel and was a truck driver whose route took him to the Brew Road sand quarry where 3 of the victims' bodies were dumped. In a subsequent task force investigation, codenamed Lyndhurst, Johnman agreed to 2 polygraph tests. He failed both.
The prime suspect in the infamous Tynong North and Frankston murders has declared his innocence. On the same day, police offered a $6 million reward for information leading to an arrest. The elderly man broke a decades-long silence to tell 7 News he's not the serial killer who took the lives of 6 women. Jodie Lee has our report.
Unknown to one another during their lives, these 6 women are forever connected. They're bound by the violent circumstances in which they were murdered and, police say, by the man who killed them.
The task forces and the original homicide investigation have certainly indicated that those 6 cases are linked.
But this morning, the man who's been the prime suspect since the 1980s again protested his innocence.
I never ever, I didn't know those people, I never saw those people, and I never thought of murdering. I didn't have, I was too busy working, long hours.
Harold Johnman is just one of almost 2,000 people interviewed in relation to the Tynong North murders.
Raymond Mr. Stinky Edmonds murdered shepherd and teenagers Abina Medill and Gary Haywood in 1966 and is suspected in a series of unsolved rapes and murders, but as he moved to New South Wales in 1980, he has been written off in this case.
Today, the ageing man echoed a sentiment shared by the victims' grieving families.
I hope they find the true person that's responsible.
I believe we all want the same thing. We want that vital bit of information to be given to the police to help solve the case.
Police are hoping the passage of time could help them solve these cases. People who may have been unwilling or too frightened to talk may now, years later, change their mind.
Harold Janman died aged 88 in August 2020. No one has been charged regarding the murders, and there is, as today, no new suspect in this case, which remain unsolved. In October 2017, Victoria Police announced a record $6 million reward, $1 million for each victim, for help in solving the case.